fiction, science fiction, horror, fantasy, crime, LGBT, thriller.
You have now entered the House of Mystery.
Welcome back into the House of Mystery. I'm Al Warren, and I've got Mr. Smoker Joe Goldberg here.
Smoker Joe's in that Garden Joe now. I just came out of
Garden
help
Joe.
my wife plant flowers, and maybe you can hear it in my nose and my throat. So there's going to be a lot of muting and drinking going on, so I don't have to offend the listener with the allergies
Well,
season.
you do all of those things all the time.
That's true. What am I talking about? Be
Sneezing,
less
offending,
offensive.
sniffing, and offending like crazy.
Unlike Brian and Jeff, who are not offensive, they are thrillers.
They are, yeah. They're pogo jumping thrillers.
Yeah, well, that's an offline discussion.
Yeah. Well,
I mean, we can be offensive if it's a requirement for the show.
hey, I'm Canadian.
the ratings.
I'm getting lots of comments about Canada. So hey, go for it. Be offensive. What the hell? We have nothing to lose at this point. So all things are wild. So joining us, Brian Andrews and Jeffrey Wilson are here. So how are you guys doing?
Doing great, man. It's been a minute.
You guys have written a lot of stuff here. How do you do this together? Like, when you have a few characters in a book and you have a lot of things going on, how is it that you work with each other? Because from what I hear, that would be terrible. No, I mean, how do you do this? Like, how do you get this? So if Brian, you have a character you're writing and working on stuff like that, what if Jeffrey doesn't like that or doesn't? Do you guys have that sort of conflict ever?
I mean, you'd think that would be like a daily occurrence and problem, but the fact that we've written, over 24 books together, I guess that's a testament to the fact that we're just collaborative. And I mean, we both were writing independently before we started collaborating, so both of us like the activity of being a storyteller. And so, that was very clear when we first started partnering together, is that we both wanted to write. So I don't know how other co-author teams do it. I mean, I think there's some where one person maybe outlines, the other person writes. But in our business, and the way that it works for us, and quite frankly is the most fun, is if we work entirely as a team. And so we're both writing. We take different characters and we swap them around, and we're constantly talking on the phone to brainstorm stuff. But we're both writing, and both of our voices sort of meld together, become Andrews and Wilson at the end of the day.
And it sounds like something you just make up when people are asking you that question about conflict. But I really can't think, not that we never disagree, but we've really never come to a head on conflict. Like, part of that is that military, team and mission before self. Like, it sounds like an advertisement, but it really does. When you serve, it gets sort of bred into your DNA. Brian likes to say one person can't drive a nuclear submarine, and that's true. And so you're used to being collaborative in everything you do. And I think we've sort of brought that to the business of writing together. But we really don't have conflict. I think there's been a handful of times where Brian feels one way, I feel another. Our sort of go-to default in that situation is, to remind ourselves, we can try anything. You can always change it. You got to, you guys get that. Like, as a writer, sometimes you lock yourself into an idea and you remember, hey, I made that up. I don't have to do it. But the other thing is, if one guy feels more strongly than the other, we just go with that and see, with the idea that, look, we can always change it later. And to the best of my recollection, whenever we've done that, we've never wound up changing it later. So the guy with the strong feeling generally is right anyway. So there just hasn't been that much conflict to resolve.
Right. You can tell us the truth later.
He who cares most wins.
I will tell you the truth later.
You can tell us the truth later off air
Yeah.
when we're not recording. Yeah.
Yeah, guys, get along. Send a fruit basket to each other. Okay, conflict and team building. You've been asked that one before, and you know that. But you said you write a lot of series, and you have a lot of different characters, main characters, and then you got Jack Ryan. So the most difficult thing for a lot of writers is building characters and keep them going throughout a book, let alone a series. So I'm trying to understand how you develop characters in a series, in a book, through a series, because I see my character in my head. He's mine. All right, they're my characters. So how do you develop that character, the character arc from it's inside a book, then from book to book, and actually from series to series when you're changing different kind of characters?
Yeah, it sounds worse than it is, and we do get asked that sometimes simply because we do have multiple series, but we also tend to release them pretty close together. So we get 3 or 4 books coming out a year sometimes, and so you would think there would be a lot of, oh wait, that's what Dempsey does, that's not what Chunk does, or whatever. But to be honest, we're very character-driven storytellers anyway, and they become so real to us. It's sort of like, if I talk about all 4 of my kids constantly, I never mix them up. I do when I call them their names, by the way. They'll point that out to you. What's your name? Don't lie to me. But I know who they are, and I know what they do, and I know what their strengths and weaknesses are and their personality types. And when I've never told a story about Jack, and I was, oh, wait, no, that was Connor. And it's sort of the same way here. I think that's a pretty good analogy. Like, John Dempsey is so real to us now that we know what he does. We know how he acts. We know how he would respond. And it's very different than how Chunk does or how Katie Ryan or Jack Ryan do or characters, whoever in 4 minutes, our Tyler Brooks. They just become real enough to us after that first book that it hasn't been an enormous problem. Now, I will say sometimes a scenario that we're brainstorming will be like, oh, this is a really good idea, this is a really good idea. And as we get into it for that next book, we go, we should hold on to this one. This is better for Jack Ryan, or this is better for Chunk, or whatever. We've done that a time or two. But I don't think I can remember a time when we got conflicted about who we're writing and in the heat of writing them. Would you agree with that, Brian?
Yeah, and I think to expand on sort of the difference between our estate work and our own individual series. With estate work like the Clancy franchise, you've got a well-established canon of characters that, we grew up on, and we love these characters, and we've read them. Now they have changed hands, so Mark Greaney was a steward of these characters, and then Mark Cameron, and now us in the Jack Ryan series. And so I think, there's a lot of intentionality when we sit down to, especially when we were working on the first book, Act of Defiance. We spent a long time just ourselves talking about what we thought were the defining characteristics of Jack Ryan, and, how we would make sure that his character ethos stayed consistent from, Clancy's original vision of Jack Ryan through, our time as the steward of Jack Ryan. And our editor at Penguin, Tom Colgan, really provided us, with that continuity and those guardrails. So, he can come along and say things like, well, Jack would never say that, or keep in mind, Jack always would think this first. And so that helps inform us to make sure that we're staying true to those characters. When it comes to the characters in our individual series, like you said, we have a lot of different balls in the air, and a lot of people would think, oh, well, would you mess up? How could you maybe keep it all straight? Would you mess up something Dempsey would say for something Chunk would say? And I like what Jeff said in his previous answer, that these characters, and maybe it's our own psychopathy at work here, I don't know, but these characters feel like real people to us. So that's sort of our answer, and that we can't mix them up, because they're like real people to us. And one of the really strange things that's happened is as co-authors, you'd think that we might have a different take on Dempsey. Well, I'd think of Dempsey answering a question or thinking one way, and Jeff would think of him another. But it turns out once you write these characters long enough, we both have the same perception of these characters, and so that's pretty cool that there's consistency across authors when it comes to characters' behavior.
So these characters, you say they're real to you. Do you hear them, see them? Do you kind of have a picture of who these characters would be or look like in a lot of cases? And is it something that, are you hearing voices at night?
I knew that's where you're.
Well,
they do tell me what to make for dinner sometimes. Is that weird?
Yeah. Well, lots of macaroni and cheese. Yeah.
And you can still drive, right? They don't take away your license.
Well, yeah. There's not at night, but yeah.
I mean, I think one of the things, you talk about sometimes when you ask writers, are you a pantser or are you a plotter? And, we're both pantsers. And what's interesting is the characters do kind of tell us what to do. Well, when we plan out, we don't have a whole lot of structure. So we write in 3-act structure, and we'll get on the phone and we'll sort of divvy up chapter assignments in Act 1. But we don't necessarily know what's going to happen, do we, Jeff, when we start the chapter? We don't know what they're going to say, what they're going to do.
Yeah, almost never. We have that general arc of an idea that almost never ends where we thought it was going to. But and that does seem weird in an author team, obviously, especially when you're writing simultaneously. But the secret sauce for that is just communication. It's not unusual for us to be on the phone 5 to 10 times in a day when we're in the heat of writing something, because we are making stuff up as we go. And that other guy's got to know what you just did. Like, you have this brilliant idea. Well, that's great. But if the other guy doesn't know because he's writing the next chapter, then that's a problem. So we can get away with it because we communicate constantly.
Yeah, I call that plancing.
There you go.
Yeah, but mostly pants. Yes, I'm a plancer. Okay, so character, got it. But in your latest series, The Dark Forces, the Shepherd stuff, there's more to there's spirituality. There's more to it than just characters. And I'm interested in how you guys pick that, or how you come up with the directions you want to go for those types of human interactions and feelings that you have going on in this series.
Yeah, this series, the Shepherd series, has been really fun for a couple reasons. One, it's very different, right, from what we do. I mean, he's still got the covert ops and all that stuff, but we have this whole other sort of speculative element that we could lay over top of it. And that was really fun and exciting. But the other thing is that to us, the story itself allows us to explore something that, while isn't discussed openly in the public domain as often as maybe it could or should be, is very real part of the average human condition. Like, there is no human being that doesn't at some point go, what does it all mean? Why am I here? Is there a God? What is his role in the universe? Is there evil? Are there demons? Whatever it is. Where you land on the answer to those questions is academic. There's no, we may one day find out what the right answers are, but in the moment, it doesn't matter that much. But the questions are universal, I think. And so this gave us a chance to sort of play around with that. And so these speculative elements of the nature of good and evil is probably the best way to talk about it. Anyone that has spent considerable time in combat, especially in certain conflicts, you can go back to World War II, you can look at, these conflicts that we've been in over the last 2 decades. You are going to get exposure to real evil that is very difficult to wrap your head around. When you see the things that human beings can do to other human beings, it's incomprehensible. And so it forces you to ask those kinds of questions. And so we wanted to explore those sorts of things through our main character, Jed Johnson. Jedidiah is a guy who he's not the typical thriller hero, right? Like John Dempsey or Chunk or Tyler Brooks, some of these other people we write. You meet them at the peak of their game. They're a badass operator, in the suck, doing cool stuff. When you meet Jed, he's a broken man. He's broken physically, he's broken emotionally, and he's broken spiritually. He's questioning what he believes. He's gone full circle from an all-in believer to not believing anything, and now he's where, at this point, what's going on. And so it is the sort of the setup for us to be able to say, is there real evil in the world? And whether you believe there is or isn't, it still makes for a hell of a fun story, right? That there's these evil forces out there in the background manipulating human beings into doing things that fit their evil agenda. And then perhaps there's also good in the world that is set up to combat it. So it was really, really fun. It's one of the most fun series we write just because there's so much there to unpack. We're 4 books in with Dark Rising, and I don't know how Brian feels, I feel like we're just beginning. Like, I think we're at the tip of the iceberg of what we can explore in terms of the human condition and in terms of, what we think and believe about good and evil in the universe. So it's really been fun.
So let me dive down just a little bit. How personal, then, are those themes that you're putting in there? How much of you guys are in these human conditions, war, evil versus good? How do you come away from feel?
I think that's a great question. And I think that as an author, as a fellow author, you certainly understand what I'm about to say, which is that, one of the reasons that authors want to tell stories is because you want to leverage your own thoughts and emotions, and maybe sometimes more than that. Maybe there's a cathartic element to it, or there's a journey that you take yourself. And I think, that intellectual curiosity and the ability to maybe address those questions from somebody else's shoes is an exercise that helps you come to sense with these things yourself. And so for both of us, this series was an opportunity for us to, as a team, but also individually, think about these questions, pose these questions, and imagine how, a flawed or broken person like Jeff explained, how Jed would face these questions. And, one thing that's interesting about Jed is when we started the story, here's a guy who was running away from his problems, and he ran away from his problems and became a Navy SEAL. And you would think, well, he's on the front line, he's taking action, he's doing all these heroic things, which is ironic considering, it was an escape for him from facing his actual demons, that he hasn't done for 15 years, And so it forces you as the author to maybe tackle some difficult questions that you've put on the back burner, or maybe, metaphorically run away from yourself. And you do it through story.
And I can say that for me, there is a part of Jed's story, that's not something we talk about publicly a lot. But for me personally, there's a big part of Jed's story that is, in fact, my story. There's an element of, so we delve into a little bit this aspect of a crisis in faith. Not a crisis of faith, like is there a God, is there not a God? But that moment where you see something so horrific that you're like, I totally got it wrong. Like whatever I thought I knew about God can't be right, because this is horrible. What kind of a loving God would let something like this happen, right? And so in my time in service, I saw some things that put me in that place. And I pretty much walked away from the faith that I had previously for a decade. And it wasn't, for me, it wasn't just like Jed. It wasn't, I don't believe anymore. It was, I can't rectify what I'm seeing with what I thought I believed. And I don't have the time right now to unpack all that because I'm working in this suck field. So I'll just not think about it. And then you just pack it up in a box and you put it in your closet and you're like, I'll deal with that shit later. Right. And so that's sort of my journey. We hint at Jed's early journey. You don't read it because we meet him sort of at the tail end of that. We meet Jed where I was probably about 10 years ago, which is, okay, I got to face some of these things and figure out what it is I believe. And so there is those aspects of Jed's story are definitely very, very personal for me because it's a journey I went on and I came up with my own answers. And in our book, we have Jed determine what he believes as well. But there is definitely a part of me and my story in that aspect of Jed's journey.
So how does this sort of affect you guys? I mean, if you're really involved with your characters and the stories, and it's a lot of your own personal life involved in what you're writing, at the end of the day, you put this in a book and you put it out there for everyone to read. Does it change you writing these books in any way?
I think that's probably true for all good writers, and you guys are great writers. So these things become personal, and you grow or you stumble or whatever alongside of your characters. When you write stuff that is character heavy, I do think you experience it. Look, I can tell you, there have been times where we have had a character die, and it impacted me so much emotionally that I felt like a moron. I'm like, what are you doing? Like, you made this dude up. Like, why are you openly weeping on your horse? Your wife is like, what is wrong with you? And so you do get, and I know you guys get this, like you really invest. These people become so real for you that I got to say, there's a character, maybe I shouldn't say for people that haven't read the Tier 1 series yet, but there's a character that his death, like, I was clinically depressed for a week after we wrote that. I don't even remember, Brian, if you wrote it or I wrote it, but I do remember I either wrote it or read it, and I've struggled for a week. It's just so real. So I think that's a legit question and a real thing for all writers. You know, you write from your experience and you're extrapolating your experiences into the lives of others. If that doesn't have an emotional impact on you, then you could be a sociopath, or you might not be writing as well as you think you are, right? So I think all of us have that. I've talked to so many writers who can tell that same story about that emotional moment with a character. So
yeah, and I think if you think about it from a reader's perspective, you would say, you know, why am I reading this book, you know, and why do I keep reading the book? You know, it's one thing to start a novel, but to commit, you know, 10, 12, 15, 20 hours, depending how long the book is, you know, you're committing a significant chunk of your life to, you know, inhabiting this other person's shoes. And so why would you do that? You know, you do that because you become emotionally invested in these characters. And so we know that if we're not emotionally invested in the characters, if we don't give a crap about what happens to them, why would the reader, right? And so it's funny, we were working on the climax for the most recent Clancy book, and one of the chapters I was working on, I called, you know, I sent it over to Jeff to take a read, and when I did, I texted him. I said, I got choked up when I was working on this, so I know that it's a good one, right? So if you are moved emotionally, you know that at least, you know, you care, and hopefully the same will be true for the reader.
But will that make your next book different? Do you know? Like when you finished a book and you've been through all that experience and you know, emotional and up and down and all that stuff, and you're finished, then you guys sit down to write the next book in the chapter of that story. Do you think it'll be different from before because of that?
Can you maybe clarify a little bit more what you mean by that?
Well, see, it's almost like living through, because you're living through what your characters are going through.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And so does that change you do you become, like, I don't want to say a better writer, but you become a different writer through these experiences?
Yeah, and I think you make certain choices, too, as a storyteller, and sometimes those choices are difficult, right? If a character dies or makes a decision that you're uncomfortable with and you know the readers are going to be uncomfortable with, I think that, you know, you have to challenge yourself. And when you look back, you know, if you look at your reader reviews, you know, which we don't consternate over them, but I do think it's good to see how people react to certain books. It never ceases to amaze me that the books where we've challenged ourselves to put the reader through the ringer and made hard choices, maybe a character died, maybe a character walked away from something, maybe a character acted in a way that was emotionally traumatic, you know, those always turn out to be the books that have the highest ratings and some of the reviews that people seem like they're the most impacted by. So yeah, I think when you start the next book in the series, it's important to go back and sort of pick up where you left off and remind yourself of why was that an emotional experience, and where is the character's headspace when you resume the story. It's a mistake to start off with, you know, well, let's just forget about that horrible thing that happened and everything's hunky-dory. And so we try to be very intentional before we start the next book in an installment that we revisit the previous book and talk about where is this character emotionally and psychologically at the beginning of this next adventure.
It's a fascinating question, too. I mean, Alan, I think about the stuff you write. Like, you're writing a lot of stuff that's not fiction, which has got to be, like, how does that impact you? I'm not trying to hijack the interview, turn it around back on you, but I mean, I've never really thought about this the way you posed it as a question, and it's kind of now fascinating to me. I can't imagine that, you know, writing about some of the horrific stuff that you've had to write about, that you've explored. I mean, that has to affect you, right? And so if it affects you personally, then is there even a universe where it can't affect you, the next thing you write or whatever? Or I think about like, I don't know, like the Devil's Own Day or something like that for Joe. Like same thing, right? Some of these things are so big and impactful and oftentimes horrific that it can't not affect you to write about it. And if that's true, then how on earth could it not affect how you write the next thing? Or maybe it makes you better. Maybe it makes you more cautious. Maybe you have PTS from it. I don't know. Like,
it's all of it. You know, for me, I do get better, I think, with each writing. Like the ones I'm working on now, I think I'm a much better writer because I know what to expect and I know the emotions that I'm going to go through. So I handle it different. But one thing I don't like is how much, you probably do this with military action, but it's how, in a way, you get, I don't know, jaded or callous. It just doesn't seem to hurt as much as you do more of it. I don't know if that makes sense.
no, I know what you're saying. I feel that. I think I feel that. And the more personal it is, you know what I mean? Like the more you're writing about something that feels intimate to you because of your own experience, like Joe writing, you know, with his background in the agency and stuff like that, there are going to be certain things that you write about, Joe, that are like infinitely more intimate for you and are going to impact you more, kind of no matter how many layers of I've written this before you put there, whereas other things maybe don't. But it's, dude, we could do an hour a week, 6-week series on just this idea. It's a really, really fascinating question.
I killed one of my characters who was my mentor in the agency, you know, Dewey Claridge. She's based on my main character. My main character is based on him. And when I did that, it really got me. Right. And he had died too recently. So it was sort of a story in a story. And it's, you know, he symbolized a lot of stuff that I was working on. It just meant a lot. Right. And it changed me going to the next book. There's just no doubt about it. Because it was weird feelings. But I was thinking about, when you have another Sons of Valor coming out, it's the tier 1 universe. And I'm wondering and Al sort of mentioned this, how does that change when you're going from sort of the human condition to the war condition, right? To the more action oriented, well, they're all action oriented, but the action and the violence and the things that happen in that universe versus maybe the more human and spiritual universe. Am I coming through?
Yeah, but I think it's important, and this is something we like to say, and any time we're doing signings or interviews like this, is that we don't distinguish them. And what I mean by that is, you know, all of our books are character driven. And so, you know, the service component, the action is the characters putting their lives at risk and taking chances and making sacrifices, potentially the ultimate sacrifice in service of principle. And so, you know, that's very rich. In fact, you know, when you watch a Marvel movie with superheroes, you know, how much skin do you have in the game if you know that you can walk away from every fight, you know, and just brush yourself off and get back up again, you know? So I think that's the difference between Sons of Valor and, you know, the Avengers, is that these characters are human beings who are not superheroes. They're regular, ordinary people doing extraordinary things. And to make yourself do those extraordinary things requires a lot of courage, a lot of sacrifice, and a lot of commitment. And so we dive into that really deep. And I think that's one of the things that makes our books potentially, I'm not saying other people in the genre aren't writing character-driven novels as well, but I think the trope of a thriller, you know, we've gone away from that. And I think that's why we have such a loyal fan base that comes back book after book after book, because they care more about the characters than they do about what action we're going to write next.
Do you ever think about what you're writing as to the reader? Like, so when you're doing a series, and especially if you're doing like a series that you've picked up, right, for that someone else has been doing, are you thinking about the reader as you write it and what you think they'll expect, or do you just do what you want to do?
I mean, you're kind of calling us out as selfish.
Yeah.
The answer is we probably should, like when you frame it that way, but I don't know that we really do. I think that we, look, we're also avid readers, right? Like, so we know what we like. And so to that extent, I think we're, a reader's expectation plays into what we're doing, but it does, to answer it honestly, it makes me feel like maybe I am a little bit egocentric in the way we approach it. We approach it more for, what's the journey for John Dempsey? What's next for Jake? What's next for, Chunk and Whitney and these characters that we've fallen in love with? And we just hope and assume that it will resonate for the readers because they're invested emotionally in the journey just like we are. I'm wondering if we would do a better job if we would think about that a little bit more, though, now that you bring it up.
I was thinking more in the terms of like Jack Ryan, right? So there's several books out, and other people, the readers have already come to an established feeling of who this person is.
I got
right.
That is a different weight for sure. I can tell you, it's the burden of the we love doing the estate things. I don't think I could write estate work for a character I didn't love. For Clancy, it's pretty easy because, we, like you guys, we grew up on that stuff. I mean, Clancy sort of invented the genre that we write in, or at least he redefined it. And so we grew up loving watching the original Ryan. I'm not talking about all the film and television adaptations, but the real Ryan stuff that Clancy invented is real for us because we were huge fans. Brian will tell you about sitting on a submarine and reading, Hunt for the Red October for the first time. How cool is that? Not knowing one day he would write a submarine book under the Clancy brand. But, so that's all luxury. But on the flip side of that, there is a lot of weight. Some of it is just logistical. And like Brian alluded to earlier, that's why we have this amazing editor, Tom Colgan. He's the continuity guru who can say, oh yeah, this and that, you got this wrong. Cause you can't remember every single book in 27 now books. So, but in terms of character, I think that we did have a unique opportunity here in the Clancy series because we came into the series late enough in its evolution that Jack Ryan is now the president, right? There's just not that much you can do with that. Like, he's the president. You could have him kidnapped. You could do stuff like that. But by and large, he's the president. He's not fast roping into any hot LZs. He's not down there in the talk at the CIA. Like, he's just not doing any of that stuff. He's making the giant geopolitical decisions. And so the timing was perfect for us to come in and bring forward characters that he invented but hadn't really fleshed out. And so I'm referring obviously to Katie Ryan. Really, the last time you saw Katie Ryan, she was a little girl who almost got kidnapped, right? She's mentioned briefly a few other times. So we were able to sort of make Katie our own, if you will, be true to who she was developed in the Clancy series, which was very little, and make her into something that became a co-protagonist with Jack. And so that freed us up a little bit from some of that burden, if that makes sense.
No, it's brilliant because that's a character people build in their mind, and you're building it for them.
I wish it was brilliant. I think it was lucky, but
no, so you're lucky all the time. But okay, let's flip this 180 though. The bad guys. How you go deep into the bad guys too. How do you work that out?
Yeah, our philosophy on bad guys is that every antagonist is the hero of his or her own story. And we've embraced that from the beginning. And, I think when you've been in real world conflict, that's easier to appreciate, the idea that each side is fighting for something that matters to them, as opposed to the other side as just sort of this mindless, robot following orders, or the trope of sort of the cat stroking James Bond villain. I think that when you embrace the fact that these are real people, you get a much richer, and authentic take on what conflict is all about. And I remember when we were working on the Sons of Valor series, we really challenged ourselves with Qasim Nadar, who's the antagonist for the first 3-book arc, because we tend to write in trilogies. And I remember at one point, Jeff, you remember this? We were like halfway through the book, we're like, I think this guy's too likable. Like, you know,
we thought we might have screwed ourselves.
yeah.
I'm like, man, I would have done that too. We made him a little too empathetic. I agree.
But then as we went, you know, it made his radicalization all the more heart-wrenching, right? And so by the time you got to the end of the book, you know, we felt like, but we weren't sure until we started asking readers, you know, we felt like if you were Kasim, or you would say to yourself, if I was Kasim, could this have happened to me? Could I have ended up making the same choices? And the answer was yes, you know, and I think the readers felt like that too. And so that empathy turns to horror when you're like, oh my gosh, you know, I could see myself ending up in the same place as this person. And that, if that doesn't disturb you or doesn't make you think, then, you know, what kind of person are you? So, yeah, I would counsel all aspiring authors or young authors to really push yourself to inhabit those shoes of your antagonist and think about their motivations, because you'll have a much better story because of it.
Yeah, it's so easy to become cliche of the bad people. They're bad, we're good. They deserve what they get. Have a nice day.
Yeah, it's a lot more fun to play in the gray too, right? Like it gives some moral conflict to both sides. Your protagonist can have some moral conflict as well, instead of just the, you know, all bad, all good, the clear-cut answer, the Dr. Evil, you know, the tropey Dr. Evil thing. It's more fun, and so therefore I think it's more fun for us to write. It's probably more engaging to read, I would think, because you get to play in the shades of gray.
I like Dr. Evil.
Me too.
Of course you do. Of course you do.
Yeah.
Are you an evil author?
Yes.
That's all he writes about is evil.
Yeah. Please, they're all nice people.
Yeah. They're all heroes as they're serial murdering their way across.
They're all heroes of their own story.
Yeah, I'd hang out. Yeah, well, actually, it's true. They are in their mind. I mean, God, I'm going through Charles Manson now. That's wow. Okay, so listen, you've got Dark Rising out now. What's coming up next? What should people expect?
We got an exciting year. We got Dark Rising just came out. It's doing great. We're loving that people were patient with us because there was a little gap between 3 and 4 as we move things around. And then Sons of Valor 4, we're very excited, is coming out in July and continues the journey with Chunk and Whitney. And we're very excited for the next Tier 1 book called The Adversary, because we've been getting a lot of fan mail about Jake, and not going to spoil anything, but some of those questions are going to be answered for everybody. So we think that that's one that people have sort of been waiting for. And then the next Clancy book from us is coming out at the end of the year, called Executive Power. So we're really, really happy to get that out there for everyone to see. And then we got some stuff on the media side that we're playing around with as well, and I can let Brian talk about that.
Yeah, for those who don't know, the Tier 1 series is under development for television at Legendary Entertainment, and we're really excited about that. We have a showrunner selected, writers working, so...
Great producers, awesome production. The producers are good friends. They're amazing. Peter Johnson and Marcus Blakely, can't believe we were able to partner with them. Super exciting.
How involved are you guys in the development and script development?
Well, one of the nice things about Legendary and Peter and Marcus is that, you know, they do value our insights and our experience as military veterans. And so, you know, we're not silent partners in the sense that, you know, hey, thanks so much for the IP, we've got it from here. So, you know, we've been involved from the very beginning. You know, we've gotten to play a role in, you know, selection of the writing team and what parts of the story are going to be adapted, and hopefully we'll continue to be involved as executive producers and consulting producers on individual episodes and the like. So yeah, we hope to and plan to stay involved.
And then we also have Shepherds is an option for television, as people know, and there's nothing we can say now. We'll just tease people. There's some exciting news about that potentially. And then we've got a couple of film things that we're developing. 4 Minutes, which is one of our favorite series because it had a cool sci-fi element to it. We're developing that with Mark Evans for feature. And yeah, I don't know. There's other stuff, I think. But yeah, busy. My wife is getting annoyed, I think, because I'm working.
You still have a wife?
Yeah, right.
Can you get Joe a job in one of these?
Yeah, I'm dying here trying to get this book done. I have plenty of time.
You can play one of these characters, or one of the mean ones. Well, listen, do you guys have social media? Do you have a website? Where do you like fans or readers to follow you or find you?
Yeah, the best way to find us, and with links to everything, is at our website. It's pretty simple. It's andrews-wilson.com. That's andrews-wilson.com. And on there we list all the books available. So right now there's links to find them in your favorite format at your favorite bookseller. They also have links to our social media. We're on X, we're on Instagram, we're on Facebook, we're on Blue Sky, we're on all of those. So, reach out, say hi if you want. You can sign up for our newsletter. That's the best way to stay in touch with us. We promise we don't share information. We won't sell your email address, and we won't spam you with all kinds of annoying emails. We'll just keep you updated on our latest releases, and that's about it. So, sign up for the newsletter. You get a free copy of a novella called Scars, which is sort of the origin story for John Dempsey, and we'd love to connect that way.
Well, fantastic. Of course, we'll have all of that up on our website as well, so people can find it easily. And is there a reason why it's Andrews Wilson and not Wilson Andrews?
I think because Jeff was pretty generous, and also we thought about alphabetical order.
I was going to say we saved the best for last, but yeah, his answer is the right answer.
Yeah, that too. Yeah.
I think we did save the best for last, though, my friend.
Yeah, there you go.
Now they're not talking to each other.
Yeah, see, I'm trying to get something going here. I can't win today. Well, we appreciate you being here, and fantastic writing and everything like that, and good conversation. So, we got Brian Andrews and Jeffrey Wilson. Thank you.
Thank you,
Guys. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
This has been a production of the House of Mystery Radio Show. To find out more about our show, guests, or hosts, go to our website at houseofmysteryradio.com.